Hello, today I'm here to bring you a review of Grief is the Thing with Feathers by Max Porter. This book annoyed me, so I had to do an individual review about it, even though this wasn't the video I had planned for today. But alas, it needed to happen because I have many feelings. This book was so difficult for me to rate. I was literally just so torn between 3 and 4 because the writing was good and it was really good. But I don't think it was as good as it could have been, and it irritated me because of that. So everyone knows what this is about by now. It's about a family who are dealing with the loss of a mother, and a sort of metaphorical grief called Crow comes into their life and kind of becomes part of their family, but also causes havoc while he is with them, and it's sort of about how they come to terms with the loss, etc. It really wound me up. Now, I've been putting this book off because I wanted to read Crow by Ted Hughes before I read it, because that's what it's inspired by and that's where the character Crow comes from. But enough people had said that you can read it without reading Crow, and I don't normally get round to poetry. I'm not really a poetry person. That's also why this was quite hard for me to rate, because I think if you're a poetry person, you'll enjoy it much more than I did. It irritated me because I really liked the aspect of the grief and I liked the family. So we see from 3 different perspectives. So we see from Crow, we see from the 2 boys in the family, and we see from the dad. I really liked the boys and the dad's aspects, but I really didn't like the Crow aspect. And I think what happened was, I mean, this is a short book as it is. It's only about 113 pages and it's not like loads of writing to a page. It's kind of broken up like a poem would be. What irritated me was that I wanted more of the family and I wanted more development there, and it wasn't there because the pages that are there, and there's not very many of them, half of them were dedicated to this Crow idea. And I feel like what's happened is that 2 ideas that didn't necessarily need to be married together have been put together in this book, and there's the sort of Crow aspect, and I really didn't like Crow's perspective. I think the other perspectives were very cohesive and there was a plot there and you could follow it, but the Crow aspect just didn't work for me. It's sort of nonsense language. Crow doesn't really say anything. He's kind of just silly. It was a silly character to me. I don't know whether that's because I haven't read Crow and so I didn't understand the Crow-esque character, but also the dad is a sort of Ted Hughes scholar, and there's bits where he goes to see Ted Hughes and he's writing an essay on Crow from Ted Hughes. I felt like that stuff didn't need to be there. Now, I may be opening myself up for people being irritated that I've said that, because I know that a lot of people who loved this loved it because of Crow. I felt like it didn't need to be there. I felt it lessened the plot and that it would have been a stronger book if the Crow aspect was gone and we focused more on the family, because we needed more from the family. Like, it was the bit I liked in the book, but we needed more from them. We needed to know more about them, and I feel like, as I say, we didn't get that because we had the aspect of Crow in there. That's why I was so irritated and I really couldn't rate it, because the bits that were beautiful were so beautiful, and there's no denying that the writing in this is good, apart from when Crow was involved. And I also didn't really understand, not that I didn't understand Crow, but that, yes, okay, he was a metaphor for grief, but also he was a physical presence in their lives and he was a physical bird in their lives, and they physically invite him into the family home. And that didn't work for me. I felt like if he was metaphorical, he needed to be more metaphorical. Like, the literal aspect of it didn't work for me because it's silly. Like, they invited a crow into their homes. And I get that he's a metaphor for their grief and that, you know, you do kind of invite grief into your life and it's just there. And that's what annoyed me as well, is that Crow was just there and there was no lead up, there was no explanation. It was just, that's how it was. They invited him in one day and then he was there and he was part of the family. And I get that grief is just there and you don't have to acknowledge it even for it to be present. I get that. But in terms of the figure of the Crow, I don't think it necessarily translated as it should have done for me. I liked best probably about this book is the fact that it sort of looked at the idea that grief isn't something you can necessarily work through or get over, or that goes away. It's there all the time. It's just, once you've experienced it, it lives with you. One thing that did confuse me a little bit was the timeline in this. So it follows them sort of just after they've lost their mum, basically. But then at times the boys grow into men, and I think maybe that was about their grief making them older than they actually were. But then there's also times when they got grandchildren and they're thinking about how they wish that their mum could have been a grandmother. So we flit around in time a bit, and I liked the fact that maybe they were older and they'd lived their lives and they still were living with this grief. But then we'll go back to them in the present day and they'll start working through the grief. So it kind of... I feel like it's just a book that needed a lot of editing, and that's what really irritated me. I also feel like it's a book that tried to be too clever in a way, and it irritates me when really good writers try to be too clever. This is why I don't like James Joyce, because he's good, but he ruins it by trying to be better than he is, and that is just the most frustrating thing. And I felt the same with this book. I felt like it ruined itself with the Crow stuff. I originally gave it 3, I then upped it to 4, then I dropped it to 3, then I gave it 4, because the writing was good and it's given me a lot to think about. And I think maybe if I come back to it time and again, and maybe if I go away and read Crow by Ted Hughes, I'll understand more why Crow had to be in there. But I think if it was a completely different book, it would have been better, and that's really strange to say, but that is the feeling that I had, and that's why it frustrated me. I would still recommend reading it, especially if you like poetry. I think if I was more of a poetry person, I might have enjoyed it a lot more than I did, but I'm not necessarily a poetry person. I don't really enjoy reading poetry. Like, yes, sometimes I find really beautiful poems, but I wouldn't want to sit down and read a book of poetry. Whereas I know a lot of people who do enjoy poetry, as I said, really enjoyed this. My opinion might not be the most informed, but it's what I felt, and I had to air my opinions because, as I say, it really, really irritated me. But yes, that's all for today. Bye!